My duty was to listen for a heartbeat that would never come. Tonight, it did. The first tremor reached through the throne like breath through bone. Dust fell from the archways in thin, golden strands. The air itself vibrated, low and patient, as if the metal were remembering how to live. I pressed my gauntlet to the conduit beside me. It was warm. It had never been warm. For 9 centuries I have served here, in the silence beneath his seat. No dawn touches these vaults. No stars dare intrude. We are the keepers of the pulse, bound to listen for a sound that faith said would never return. Most nights I believed the silence had become him, that stillness was our God now, but tonight the stillness moved. At first, I thought it was the hum of reactors above the palace, some tremor of the Mechanicus correcting their endless rituals. Then the vibration deepened. It passed through the plating, through the oil beneath my boots, through the chambers of my chest. The sound did not fill the room. It filled me. They trained us not to imagine, yet I imagined it a single heartbeat echoing through 10,000 years of stillness. One, slow, heavy, beautiful. The echo of it rippled through the walls. Candles bent toward the sound, their flames stretching like supplicants. Somewhere, deep in the masonry, rivets groaned as if in pain. I whispered the only word that still feels like prayer: Majesty. The reply came not in voice but pressure. The air thickened. The incense haze folded into spirals, then into symbols that vanished before I could read them. My visor display flashed static sigils untranslated, alive. Every conduit sang. Each note carried the weight of galaxies. I remembered my initiation, the vow of silence made before the golden throne. You will hear his glory and never speak of it. Back then, I thought it poetry. Now, I understand it was warning. Because when the throne speaks, language dies. Something crawled up my spine. Heat, not pain. The armor's servos jittered, trying to sync with a rhythm larger than pulse. I realized the heartbeat wasn't alone. There were smaller beats now, faint and desperate echoes from other custodians across the sanctum, each heart stuttering to match the greater rhythm. Our bodies had become instruments. Through the gold-lit haze, I saw Brother Corin fall to his knees, both hands clutching his chestplate. "It's him," he mouthed, though I could barely read his lips. I wanted to reach him, to share belief, but the throne exhaled again, and the sound drowned thought itself. The lumen globes flickered once, twice, then burned white. The stone beneath us flexed like muscle. A shockwave rolled through the chamber, silent and immense. I staggered, my hand still pressed to the conduit, and felt the pulse again louder, surer, impossibly alive. We have guarded a corpse for 10,000 years. I have polished his armor, stood sentinel beside his husk, recited the catechisms that declare him divine. But nothing in those scriptures warned me what life would feel like. Somewhere far above, alarms began to toll. I could not hear them properly. The sound bent around the throne's hum, swallowed whole. My helm relays filled with static that pulsed in time with that impossible heartbeat. I should have fallen to my knees. I should have prayed. Instead, I stared at the golden cables running into the sarcophagus and saw them move not with current, but with breath. Then came the second heartbeat, louder, certain, and the lumen globes burst, showering us in sparks that smelled of copper and incense. The throne shuddered as if answering itself. I thought I was ready for his return. I was not. The pulse came again, deep, resonant, and every light in the chamber bowed. The second heartbeat had not yet faded when the air turned bright. Not light as sight, but light as weight. A pressure of gold that pressed behind my eyes and filled the hollows of my skull. Every conduit flared, every rune on the sanctum floor began to bleed molten color. The hum of the throne deepened into a tone so pure it felt like silence tearing open. Brother Corin collapsed beside me, steam spilling from the seals of his armor. His lips moved, voiceless. I caught fragments of his breath, the words of the litanies of custody, choked and mangled by wonder. One by one, the others joined him, kneeling, heads bowed, as if gravity itself had turned devout. The conduits on the dais rippled. The veins of gold that fed the sarcophagus thickened and twitched, carrying currents that sang in harmony with the pulse. Somewhere deep inside that machine tomb, fluid began to circulate, a mechanical bloodstream rediscovering its course. I could taste it in the air, metal and ozone and something older than blood. We had been taught that the throne was a machine of infinite patience, a divine engine holding back the tides of the warp. But the smell now was that of resurrection, sterile, chambers warming to flesh. I felt the change through the soles of my boots. The marble beneath us softened, the way old stone does when it remembers it was once molten. A voice came through the vox line, the chamber mago screaming rites of containment. His syllables crackled and broke. The Emperor's pulse consumed the frequency. For a heartbeat I heard not his words, but a chorus, thousands of Mechanicus voices, all speaking the same prayer backward. Then the vox went dead. I looked up to the sarcophagus. The aureate panels shifted by degrees, like eyelids reconsidering sleep. Beneath them, I glimpsed something brighter than light, the reflection of a sun that should not exist. Instinct made me bow my head. The heat peeled lacquer from my pauldrons. "Hold your post," I ordered, though my voice shook. The words echoed across the chamber, smaller than the sound that followed a low groan, as if the entire palace were stretching after a long confinement. The throne inhaled. The incense flames bent toward it, drawn by the same breath. Every lumen went dark, except for the glow within the sarcophagus. The shadows that remained were sharp enough to cut. For a moment, I thought I saw movement inside that glow, shapes, wings, a man, a god. But when I blinked, it was gone, replaced by streams of liquid light crawling across the chamber walls. They traced the imperial aquila in reverse, feathers folding inward until only an eye remained. Fear found me then, not the coward's fear of death, but the loyalist's fear of revelation. If this was truly him, what would he see when he looked at us? I tried to speak another command, to restore the ritual calm drilled into us by millennia, but the words turned to static on my tongue. My helmet's display blanked, then filled with lines of code I had never seen. They moved like scripture and heartbeat both. I tore the helm free. The sound outside was clearer, the sound of the throne thinking. The pulse quickened. The chamber shook. Bolts rained from the ceiling like meteors of gold. A wind rose from nowhere, warm and electric, stirring the banners of Terra's eagles until they cracked like whips. Brother Corin looked up at me, eyes shining through a glaze of tears and light. "He's awake," he mouthed again. But I no longer knew if he meant the Emperor or the machine. The pulse came again, louder still, and the metal floor flexed beneath us. From far above, in corridors I could not see, alarms began to toll the wordless hymn of catastrophe. And then impossibly, the sarcophagus sighed. Every custodian froze. The sound was neither mechanical nor divine. It was human, ragged, and full of pain. The throne had learned to breathe. The sigh lingered, low and human, echoing through the vault like breath drawn through eternity. No one spoke. Even the Mechanicus adepts above, those ever-babbling keepers of the throne's machinery, fell silent. We had waited 10 millennia for a sign, and now that it came, none dared to name it. I felt the sound travel up through my boots, through the armor's servo lines, until it reached my chest plate. My own hearts answered, first with terror, then with obedience. They began to beat in time with the throne. The pulse that had once seemed distant now lived inside me. Around me, my brothers trembled. Gold-plated giants, each bred for stillness, each carved to be unyielding, and yet the rhythm claimed them all. I saw Brother Corin clutch his helm against his chest, gasping. Others whispered fragments of forgotten battle hymns, desperate to drown the growing harmony. The chamber itself vibrated to that rhythm, a massive lung learning to breathe. I heard metal expanding, stone bending, and somewhere, the faintest sound of a heart too vast for comprehension. The pulse, once every 7 seconds, then 6, then 5. The banners along the walls tore themselves free of their mounts, swept into the unseen wind of psychic resonance. Incense braziers flared white, their smoke forming brief silhouettes, wings, faces, memories of saints. The air was heavy with ozone and salt, as though the sea had found its way beneath the palace. Then came the light, not from the throne, but from us. Thin seams opened across my gauntlets, lines of dull gold that pulsed in rhythm with the sound. I felt each vibration crawling beneath my skin, filling the seams where faith had replaced blood. My armor was no longer armor, it was part of the song. I staggered back, pressing a hand to my chest. The heartbeat inside me was not mine anymore. It struck like thunder, each throb reshaping thought into prayer, prayer into submission. The pain was exquisite, a sanctified agony that burned through centuries of silence. Through the glare I saw the sarcophagus change. The aureate shell rippled, and for a fraction of a moment I thought I saw his hand. Not a statue's marble perfection, but something wounded, trembling alive. The fingers twitched once, as if testing the shape of creation. Every custodian fell prostrate then, as our creed demanded, but obedience no longer felt holy. It felt instinctive, animal, the body bowing before its heartbeat. Somewhere high above, the Astronomicon flickered. I saw it not with eyes, but through the pattern of light that filled my skull. Billions of souls called out across the void, their prayers returning amplified, distorted, transformed. The Emperor's signal, once steady as law, now pulsed in chaos, reaching through the Imperium like the throes of awakening. The voice of the chamber magos returned on the vox, distorted, frantic. Containment breached energy output, unquantifiable faith readings spiking. Then static swallowed him whole. My hearts pounded faster. I could feel them sinking with the throne, perfectly aligned. A thought pierced the roar. If his pulse replaces ours, what remains of us? The floor cracked beneath my knees. Gold dust rained from the arches, each particle gleaming like a prayer undone. The conduits writhed, veins feeding the sarcophagus, glowing with liquid light. And within that impossible light, I saw movement slow, uncertain, like the stirring of someone lost in dream. The chamber temperature plummeted. Frost spread across the marble, spider webbing under my palms. The pulse slowed again, deep, deliberate, sovereign. The Emperor was no longer dreaming. He was listening. A new rhythm joined the first, faint but undeniable. The throne was answering its occupant, machine and God speaking in the only language both could share, sound and pain. Then, in the deafening quiet between beats, I heard something else. My name. Not shouted, not whispered, remembered. The sound of it stripped every defense bare. I fell forward, forehead to the stone, tears searing my eyes. No mortal had heard their name spoken by him since the heresy. And yet I knew, with absolute certainty, that the voice was real. The throne shuddered once more, and silence fell like a shroud. The heartbeat was gone, but the echo stayed, buried inside me, where my soul used to be. When the sound ended, I thought the world would sigh in relief. Instead, it screamed. The first cry came from Brother Corin. He bent backward, armor hissing at the seams, helm falling away as his mouth opened wider than breath should allow. No sound emerged at first, only light, pouring from his throat like molten prayer. Then the air carried his scream, and it was not his voice anymore. It was the sound of thousands, echoing through him, each one dying in the same breath. The pulse had gone, but its rhythm remained inside us, a ghost beat hammering at bone and thought alike. Every custodian still standing pressed gauntleted hands to their chests, as though we could still our hearts by force. It did not help. The rhythm was no longer ours to command. The throne chamber heaved like a wounded lung. The candles went out all at once. In the darkness, the afterglow of the sarcophagus painted everything in pale, bruised gold. That color moved, slow and sickly, bleeding across the walls like dawn arriving through flesh. My vox crackled with overlapping channels, Mechanicus adepts wailing prayers, the high gate custodes shouting containment orders, and beneath it all, the quiet voice of a woman repeating, "He is rising, he is rising," until her tone dissolved into static. The psychic backlash hit next. It was not a wave, but a weight. My knees buckled. The floor's runes lit white hot, pressing through my boots until pain climbed my legs like liquid fire. My vision fractured. One moment the chamber, the next, scenes I could not have witnessed. Ships burning in orbit, priests clawing their own eyes out, the void itself thrashing in golden convulsion. He was awake somewhere inside that machinery, testing the boundaries of his own containment. The silence was not absence, it was thought. I could feel it crawling across my mind, patient, searching. We had sworn never to question divinity, but in that moment, I did. What if the Emperor's mercy is measured by what he forgets? The realization struck like a lash of light. The pulse had passed through us, a signal broadcast across terror, and the silence was what followed an accounting. The faithful trembled under invisible judgment, the impure burned from within. Across the city, billions knelt without knowing why. Brother Corin's scream broke into sobs. He tore his gauntlets off and held his hands up. They were glowing from the inside, veins lit like fiber-optic script. The words of the canticle of devotion scrolled beneath his skin, written in fire. I reached for him, but my arm refused the command. Servo muscles locked, responding to some higher authority. My armor trembled. Every sensor rune flashed the same phrase: cognitive override detected. The throne's conduits began to contract, drawing back toward the sarcophagus. Gold metal moaned, under strain. Sparks rained like stars. Each pulse of light from within that coffin felt like breath, drawn by something vast and restless. Then came the wind again, psychic this time, a storm of thought. My vision filled with silhouettes. Saints, martyrs, the Emperor's children, all rising from memory. They reached toward me through air that shimmered like water. I smelled ash and burned parchment. When I blinked, they were gone, leaving only whispers behind. "You hear him," they said. "You are the echo he needs." I dropped to one knee, clutching my helm against my thigh, whispering what remained of my catechism. Words failed halfway through. I tried to remember their order, but my mind was full of static and gold light. Somewhere deep in the palace, warning klaxons began to toll again, slow, mournful, as if struck by weary hands. The pulse returned once, faint, like a dying ember reigniting. I thought I felt it pass through my chest again. Then everything in the sanctum exhaled metal, stone, flesh, and the chamber fell still. Only then did I realize the truth. The heartbeat I heard this time was my own, and it wasn't mine anymore. The air turned gold, and then it began to sing. Not with melody or language, but with the resonance of a mind too vast to fit inside creation. The song was vibration pressure that climbed from marrow to skull, forcing every thought into the same rhythm. My eyes blurred with tears I didn't feel forming. The world was trembling inside the sound. I saw the chamber through a haze of radiance. Custodians staggered like pilgrims caught in a hurricane of light, their plumes burning to ash, their armor melting along the engraved wings of the Aquila. Each one tried to hold position, but the storm was thought, not wind. There was nowhere to stand against it. Above us, the throne's conduits writhed like veins of lightning. Sparks fell like burning incense, sizzling on my armor. I heard the Mechanicus priests shrieking, data prayers through the vox. Their liturgies scrambled, voices folding into machine code. Cognitive interference, divine anomaly, pattern uncontainable. Then their transmissions merged into one monotone chorus, repeating a single phrase. "He is thinking." The words hit like thunder. The floor shuddered, cracks spidered across the marble. The imperial sigils carved into the walls glowed bright white, then turned black, burned away from within. Brother Corin's body convulsed beside me. His eyes rolled back. His mouth moved in silent mimicry of the same chant the adepts had spoken. I grabbed his shoulder, trying to steady him, but the moment I touched him, his mind flooded into mine. I saw flashes, the golden plains of pre-heresy terror, the siege, the war master's laughter, all through Corin's memory, all wrapped in burning light. Then something colder entered the vision, vast and merciless. A will. My helm's auto-seals slammed shut, trying to block the IL signal, but the sound had already burrowed deeper than vox range it lived inside thought now. The throne exhaled. Every lumen globe imploded. Darkness rushed in, heavy and absolute. Only the glow from the sarcophagus remained, a living sun contained within the ribcage of humanity's god. I heard a whisper through the dark. At first, I thought it came from the Emperor, but it was mine. "You are not hearing him, Cassian," it said. "You are what he hears." My heart froze mid-beat. The silence between pulses stretched until time itself seemed to pause. I felt the space between thoughts widen, and in that gap something began to move. I turned my gaze toward the sarcophagus. The golden plates were shifting again, fracturing along seams older than memory. Beneath them, light oozed like molten soul stuff, too bright to endure, too sacred to look away. The Mechanicus priests surged forward, chanting their containment hymns. One reached the dais and pressed a rune rod to the floor. The feedback was instantaneous, his flesh ignited from within, burning white-hot. But his voice did not stop. He screamed words that were not human, syllables that tore the air. Then there was nothing left but his shadow, seared into the wall. The throne's hum deepened again, so low it rattled the teeth in my skull. A vibration rippled through the palace foundations, through the crust of terror itself. Somewhere above us, windows shattered across miles, Vox traffic collapsed into silence. I wanted to speak, to order a retreat, to pray, but speech no longer existed. My mind was an open channel now, a conduit. Every breath I took was borrowed. Then I heard him, not in sound, but in memory. His presence pressed behind my eyes like sunlight against glass. Words formed in a voice older than language. "What have you done in my name?" I tried to answer. I don't know what I said. I only remember the heat behind my eyes, the taste of ash on my tongue, the sense of something vast, leaning close enough to breathe through me. The pulse returned, one heavy, deliberate beat. My chest answered without permission. My heart had become his instrument. Brother Corin screamed one final time, the cry swallowed by light, and vanished. I fell to my knees. Around me, silence returned, total, suffocating, and somewhere within it, the Emperor was listening. The silence after the storm was not quiet, it was absolute, a silence that swallowed thought, that turned memory into glare. I realized, dimly, that I was still kneeling, one hand pressed to the marble, my palm fused to it by molten gold. I lifted my head and saw the throne's radiance dim to a steady pulse, soft, rhythmic, deliberate. Each beat echoed through the sanctum, slower now, measured, as though he were pacing himself. Then the visions began. At first they came like afterimages, flashes of light and faces burned onto the air. Then they grew. The chamber faded, replaced by scenes so vast that my mind stretched to contain them. I saw terror before the palace, green oceans, blue skies, cities that prayed to no one. Then the great crusade, armies of light devouring the stars, their banners radiant with purpose. And then the rot, temples rising where laboratories had stood, sermons replacing science, priests rewriting truth. The images came faster, a line of cardinals kneeling before a throne of bones, a planet burning in the shape of the Aquila, a child crying in the dark, whispering his name to no answer. These were not memories, they were confessions. I felt them pass through me, each one a sin peeled from the flesh of the Imperium. Every thought, every cruelty, every small betrayal made in his name, they poured through my skull, as if the Emperor were emptying himself of millennia of witness. I tried to shut my eyes, but the light was inside me now. I saw with nerves, with heartbeat, with faith. The throne's hum deepened. I understood. I was no longer hearing his dream. I was inside it. A voice spoke 1,000 voices overlaid until they became one. "See what you have made of me." The light surged, and I saw the ecclesiarch, the high lords, the endless processions of penitent flesh. I saw armies marching beneath banners of his corpse, killing in praise of his name. Each image struck like a hammer blow of clarity. The Emperor's mind was not wrathful, it was sorrowful. He was showing me the cost of worship. I tried to answer, but my tongue moved in languages I did not know. My armor's vox picked up the sound and transmitted it through every conduit in the chamber. The echoes came back, layered with other voices, brothers, priests, strangers, all repeating the same broken phrase, "Forgive us, forgive us, forgive us." The gold veins of the floor burst, releasing a flow of molten light that pooled around the dais. Within it I saw reflections, not my face, but thousands, all mine, all kneeling in unison. Pain followed clean, absolute. Every implant in my skull fired at once. The interface between man and machine flared white-hot, and I understood that the Emperor's mind had touched the noosphere. The entire Mechanicus network screamed in binary praise, then fell silent. I could taste the ashes of their prayers in my mouth. The visions bled outward. Through the throne's psychic channels, through the Astronomicon, they carried across the void. I felt planets stir, ships halt mid-warp, psychers collapse under the weight of his dreaming. Humanity, all at once, looking up. The pressure built until thought itself splintered. My name dissolved first, then time, then language. Only sensation remained. Heat, rhythm, light. The last thing I remember clearly was the throne's whisper, close and personal, vibrating through the metal that had become my skin. "You are my witness." Then everything went white. When I opened my eyes, I did not see the throne. I saw the inside of light. It stretched without edge or direction, a cathedral of illumination that breathed like a living lung. There were no walls, only currents, tides of gold and white moving through each other as if they were thoughts made visible. Every pulse carried sound, and every sound carried meaning. For a moment, I believed I had died. Then I felt the weight of my armor, the ache of my knees, the faint throb of my heart still answering the rhythm of another. I was still alive, but not where life was meant to be. The silence here was different, it was aware. I could feel it pressing around me, curious, measuring the shape of my existence. When I tried to speak, the sound dissolved into light. The air itself responded, rippling in concentric rings. A figure began to form before me, not standing, not moving, assembling from the radiance itself. First the outline of a man, then armor, then the impression of a face I could not hold in memory. Every time my eyes fixed upon it, the image changed. Warlord, scholar, corpse, god, as though the truth was all of them and none. Then the voice came. "Do you know what you are seeing?" It was not sound, but command. The question entered my mind fully formed, bypassing thought. My body trembled under the weight of it. "I see you, Majesty," I tried to say, but my voice was no longer mine. The words echoed in the chamber, spoken by 100 different tones, all sharing my mouth. "No," the voice replied, "you see what remains of me." The brilliance dimmed, revealing scars of shadow running through the light fissures like cracks in glass, each one pulsing with dark fire. Through them I glimpsed shapes that moved, wrong things that crawled between the boundaries of his thought. They looked like memories that had turned feral. "These are your prayers," the voice said. "This is what you built." I felt the light wrap around me, showing visions again, but not as before. Now, I stood within them. I walked through temples lined with skulls, heard preachers shout his name over the screams of the dying. Everywhere the same image, humanity worshipping its savior through endless cruelty. "I am only a servant," I said. My voice was small, almost lost in the glare. "A servant shapes his master by how he serves," the voice answered. "I was never meant to be this." The words struck harder than any blade. I fell to one knee, not from reverence but from shame. Around me the visions folded in armies of zealots, cities of shrines, billions praying for salvation that never came. "Do you know what faith costs, Cassian Ordell?" The sound of my name in that voice shattered what composure I had left. "Everything," I whispered. The light pulsed once approval, or perhaps sorrow. "Then you understand. You are the echo of their belief. You are my heartbeat, given form." The chamber dimmed. The radiance folded inward, condensing into a single burning shape, a heart of golden shadow, suspended in the air. I felt it throb in perfect time with my own. He was showing me the link, the impossible truth that I had been chosen not to witness his return, but to become its conduit. The Emperor's pulse was my pulse now, Every beat that sustained him came through me. The realization was unbearable. My mind recoiled, seeking boundaries, but there were none left. The light pressed closer, searing thought into obedience. "You will carry me," the voice said, "until the stars remember my name." The pulse struck again. My body convulsed. The chamber of light fractured, each shard trailing fire as it fell into the dark below. I screamed, but the sound was music. And somewhere far away, in the real and dying world, the golden throne began to beat once more. The chamber of light fell inward. I landed hard, metal striking stone, but there was no pain, only vibration. Every atom of me quivered, tuned to a frequency that was not human. At first, I thought the vision had ended. I could see the sanctum again, its marble cracked and blackened, the air thick with gold dust. Yet everything shimmered, doubled, as if another world lay a breath behind this one. Then the sound returned, not heartbeat this time, but breath. It came from inside me. I opened my mouth to call for my brothers, but another voice answered, layered atop mine, deep as gravity. "Do not speak. You will break." The tone froze the marrow in my bones. It was the same resonance that had filled the light, the voice of the Emperor, now threaded through my flesh. I staggered backward. "Majesty, you will speak for me." My visor flickered. Data runes appeared, reshaping themselves into syllables that pulsed in time with my heart's. The words glowed across the inside of my helm, command lines written in prayer. I tried to close my eyes, but the lids refused. The body was still mine, but the will behind it was not. Around me, the surviving custodians began to rise, dazed. I watched as one, then another, turned toward the throne. Their faces were blank, their movements perfectly synchronized. Every step they took echoed the rhythm inside my skull. The Emperor was aligning them, tuning his guardians to the same frequency. The air thickened again. My armor's servos whined as the pressure mounted. The rune plate at my chest split along its seam. Light poured out, pale gold and trembling. "Through you, they will hear." The phrase vibrated through my ribs. I felt my lungs fill with fire. I tried to breathe it out, but the exhale became a voice, his voice pouring through me like molten brass. The sound shattered the silence. Every lumen globe reignited, flaring white. The chamber erupted with echoes. The surviving custodians fell to their knees, hands clasped in prayer or terror, I could not tell which. Words followed, thunder disguised as language. "I was reason, you made me faith. I was flesh, you made me God. Now you will remember what God was meant to be." Each sentence felt like the strike of a hammer inside my skull. I wanted to beg forgiveness, but my mouth was still his. Outside, the world answered. The sound carried beyond the walls, across the palace, into the sky. I saw flashes through the cracks of reality cities halting mid-motion, priests collapsing mid-prayer, psychers bursting into flame as the Astronomicon convulsed. The Emperor's first words in 10 millennia tore through the veil of the warp and the minds of all who listened. The strain was unbearable. Blood streamed from my eyes and ears, hissing where it touched the armor. The smell of iron and incense mingled in the air. I felt consciousness slipping, but he would not let me fall. "Stay," the voice said through me. "Witness what you have wrought." I saw visions blooming across the chamber walls like living frescoes, every atrocity committed in his name rendered in molten gold. Wars of faith, purges, the slow rot of bureaucratic holiness. The Emperor's gaze, through me, lingered on each one like a father studying his own ruin. Then, softer, "I do not hate you. I remember you." For a moment, the pressure eased. I felt warmth instead of pain. Gratitude, maybe, or exhaustion. I tried to whisper thank you, but the light swallowed the sound. Something shifted deep within the sarcophagus, a mechanical sigh, almost tender. Then the voice withdrew, leaving my body hollow and trembling. I collapsed, gasping, my own breath finally mine again. But even as I drew air, I knew I was no longer the same. The words still vibrated behind my ribs, waiting to be spoken again. The Emperor had spoken through me once, and he was not finished. The chamber still glowed with fading light, but my vision was elsewhere. The words he had spoken through me did not stop at the walls of the sanctum. They escaped. At first, I thought I could feel them only as echoes, vibrations in the metal, ripples in the air, but then I realized they had gone further. His voice was running through the Astronomicon. The beacon that once guided ships through the warp was now a transmitter of revelation. The moment it touched the noosphere, reality changed. Across the psychic spectrum, humanity heard. I felt them one by one, a million voices gasping in unison, an entire species turning its face toward the sun and finding it alive. Every mind became a mirror for the words he had spoken. Every heart tried to match the rhythm that was mine. The effect was instant. On Terra, the air became heavy, charged with gold dust that fell like ash. Pilgrims in the outer courtyard screamed his name until their throats tore. Administratum clerks collapsed over their ledgers, eyes glowing white. Choirs of astropaths burst into flame mid-prayer. Through the link, I saw it all. The Emperor's thought streaming outward through my consciousness, burning across the skein of the warp. Entire sectors caught in the same pulse, their worlds vibrating in time with the heartbeat of a god they had forgotten how to understand. It was beautiful. It was monstrous. I tried to sever the link, to draw back into the safety of my own skull, but my body was already gone. I was thought now a fragment of his awakening, echoing through the warp currents. I could feel the galaxy unfolding, ships halting mid-flight, psychers screaming, planets trembling as faith reignited like wildfire. In one heartbeat, humanity was united again. In the next, it began to break. Every creed interpreted his voice differently. Some heard promise, others doom. On one world, priests declared the day of ascension and burned their cities in offering. On another, soldiers dropped their weapons and knelt in silent awe. In the void between stars, astropaths died smiling, their last words a single whisper, "He speaks." I wanted to call out, to tell them it was not command but lament that he did not awaken to rule, but to remember. But no sound came. My thoughts no longer belonged to me. I felt him moving through the network, seeking something, a memory, perhaps, or a name long buried. His awareness brushed mine again, and for a moment I saw the galaxy through his perception. Each soul was a spark in a sea of darkness, each prayer a wound reopening. "They have made me infinite," he said within me, "and therefore blind." The words carried sorrow so vast it drowned everything else. I saw the Astronomicon flare brighter than it had since the heresy, a beacon so intense it split the warp open like fabric. The Chaos gods howled in the distance, their laughter turning to screams. For one impossible moment, their voices fell silent. The power drained from me in an instant. My body slammed back into the chamber, breath ripping through my lungs. The throne loomed before me, humming with quiet exhaustion. The conduits hissed, bleeding gold vapor. All around, custodians lay scattered, motionless. Brother Corin's armor was empty, his body turned to ash within it. The scent of him lingered, mixed with burnt incense and ozone. I dragged myself upright, leaning against the dais. My hands trembled. Through the hum, I still heard, his pulse steady, calm, terrible. He was awake now, fully. But the galaxy was breaking beneath the sound of his voice, and in the hollow between heartbeats, I wondered if I had just witnessed salvation or its mirror. I awoke to the taste of metal and the smell of burning prayer. The sanctum was no longer the chamber I had known. The gold veneer of its walls had peeled, revealing veins of living circuitry that pulsed with faint light. The air shimmered with dust, too bright to be ash, microscopic fragments of data and bone. I drew a breath, and it burned. My lungs felt lined with static. Every heartbeat now echoed through the floor, feeding back from the throne in pulses of dull gold. Somewhere, coolant leaked in rhythmic hiss, as though imitating breath. Bodies surrounded the dais, my brothers, motionless. The proud plumes of the 10,000 lay blackened, their armor, once radiant, now dulled with soot and sin. I touched Brother Corin's pauldron, It crumbled beneath my hand, leaving only ash, and the faint shape of the Aquila scorched into the floor beneath him. Only I remained. The silence was unbearable. It was not emptiness, it was expectation, the kind that fills the lungs before a confession. I turned toward the throne. The sarcophagus had changed again. Cracks ran along its gilded surface like veins of light, each one leaking a faint radiance that flickered in time with my heart. The hum of the machine was softer now, almost tender. Beneath it, I heard something else murmurs. Not words yet, but syllables forming in the machinery, like the beginning of thought. "Majesty," I whispered, and the word trembled through the chamber like a ripple on still water. The answer came at once. Not in sound, sound could never hold it. The thought arrived in my mind, carried on the pulse that still bound us together. "Rise, Cassian Ordel." The command struck like thunder through glass. My legs obeyed before I could think. The pain of movement came after the sharp reminder that I still possessed flesh. "You will speak when I speak. You will act when I act. You are." My voice until the silence ends. My throat tightened. "I am not worthy," I tried to say, but the words dissolved mid-air, replaced by another's. "No one is." The world around me bent. The walls breathed, expanding and contracting with the same rhythm that filled my chest. The Emperor's pulse had become the chamber's law. A flicker of motion drew my gaze upward, Mechanicus adepts staggering through the collapsed entryway. Their robes were burned, their faces masked with soot. They approached in fear and reverence, their voices a broken choir. "Containment, impossible," one stammered. "The circuits sing, the throne responds to no command." Another fell to his knees, arms raised. "He is awake," the adept whispered. "Praise be." Before the words finished, the throne pulsed once. A line of light swept through the chamber, precise as a blade. The adepts froze mid-prayer, their bodies outlined in brilliance, then turned to gold dust. The light passed harmlessly through me. I understood the message. No more worship. The thought seared itself across my mind. I staggered, pressing both hands to my temples. The pain was exquisite, a relic's touch branded into living flesh. My breath came shallow. I wanted to scream, but it would have been blasphemy now. The pulse quickened. I felt it crawling through the conduits again, reaching outward, searching. The throne's voice vibrated through my spine, each syllable reverent and terrible. "The galaxy listens, we will speak again." And then, silence. The light within the sarcophagus dimmed to a steady glow. My body shook, every nerve burning with residual power. My armor's internal sensors scrolled unreadable data, lines of code that shifted into scripture before vanishing. I fell to my knees, head bowed before the throne. "Majesty," I whispered, though I no longer knew if I prayed or confessed. "What would you have me say?" The answer came as the faintest breath through the chamber, felt rather than heard. "Everything they have forgotten." The command echoed inside me until I could no longer tell where thought ended and will began. "Everything they have forgotten." My throat tightened, dry as parchment. I opened my mouth to speak, and the world leaned closer to listen. At first, there was nothing, only the faint crackle of the conduits, the slow breathing of the machine. Then the voice rose through me like fire up a wick. The first syllables scraped my throat raw, shaped by lungs that had forgotten how to draw their own breath. "I am not a god." The words rolled through the sanctum and out into the world beyond. I felt them move through the walls, through the air, through the minds of everyone still living on. Terror. The statement carried weight, heavy enough to bend the air. The surviving adepts fell to the floor, clutching their heads. The remaining custodians, those who still had breath, froze mid-motion. Even the throne's machinery stilled, awaiting the next sentence. "I was a man-builder, dreamer, tyrant. You crowned my corpse because you feared the silence." My vision blurred with tears that were not mine. The voice that used me spoke in perfect calm, neither wrathful nor gentle, but absolute. Each word resonated through the chamber like scripture rewritten at the moment of reading. The pulse flared again. I saw it travel outward across the sky, a golden wave radiating through the palace spires. Vox relays carried the vibration to every continent. The astropathic choirs screamed as his message filled their channels. The Emperor's confession spoken through my mouth was being heard by all mankind. The voice continued, unbroken. You built your faith upon my silence. You used my name to kill, to burn, to bind each other. That was not my design. I made you to endure, not to worship. A priest at the edge of the dais tried to rise. His voice cracked. Blasphemy, no, he would never. The throne's light flashed once, and he fell without sound, smoke rising from the hollow where his eyes had been. No more idols, the voice said through me. No more thrones. The chamber shook. I felt the power of it running through me, tearing at nerves, setting my veins alight. My armor began to split along its seams, golden plates peeling back as if to expose what was truly speaking inside. Majesty, I whispered between breaths, you will unmake everything. Then they may finally learn creation. Outside the palace, I saw visions through the throne's sensors, streets flooded with light, pilgrims collapsing as the message reached them, statues cracking, icons weeping molten gold. Entire hive spires glowed from within as the Emperor's words set their minds aflame with memory. The voice faltered for a heartbeat. For the first time I sensed strain, pain. He was forcing divinity into language again, and it was breaking him. Tell them this, he said, and the tone softened, almost human. The light was never mine, it was theirs. The throne exhaled one final time, a sound like a dying star sighing. The radiance dimmed. I collapsed forward, hands braced on the scorched marble. Blood dripped from my lips, gleaming gold in the fading glow. My throat was raw, every word carved into it like scripture. Silence followed, a silence vast and waiting. I realized, with terror and awe, that every ear across terror was still turned toward me, waiting for more. But there was nothing left to say. The voice had gone. Only the echo remained, his truth lingering in my veins like a second heartbeat. And in that echo, I understood. The Emperor had spoken through me not to rule again, but to end. The worship that had caged him. The faith of mankind had fractured, and I was the crack. The echo of his voice had not faded before the world began to break. From the throne's cracked conduits, I saw the light scatter outward, racing along the Astronomican's veins like blood through the arteries of creation. Every relay, every psychic choir, every dreaming soul became a mirror for his last words. The light was never mine, it was theirs. The effect was instant, unstoppable. Across the palace, the hymns turned to screams. Through the walls of the sanctum, I could hear them, priests clawing at their robes, confessors smashing their icons, soldiers casting down their last weapons and begging forgiveness from the air itself. The entire planet began to tremble. The Emperor's revelation had reached them all, and faith, that ancient armor of mankind, began to melt like wax under a sun too close. I felt their minds colliding through the psychic network. Belief itself was burning. Cities filled with gold light that rose from within their people. Pilgrims evaporated in the midst of prayer, leaving only the echo of the words, "We were wrong." The Mechanicus tried to fight it first. They sealed their temples, flooded their cathedra with null fields, chanting that the Omnissiah could not lie. But the signal reached through the metal, through the logic cores, through the machine spirits that had always been fragments of his design. One by one, the engines of the Imperium knelt. Forge fanes powered down, reactors sang themselves into silence. The galaxy's beating heart skipped its rhythm. I saw it all, not with eyes, but through the pulse still linking me to him. The visions poured through my skull until pain blurred into ecstasy. Planets rose in riot. Governors hung themselves in their citadels. In the void, whole fleets turned their guns inward, unable to bear the paradox of a god who denied godhood. "Mercy," I begged aloud, though my voice was small, childlike. "Majesty, they cannot endure this." The air around the throne shimmered, gold to white, and the pulse replied not in words but feeling, sadness, finality. "Mercy is the end," the thought came. "Their worship chained me, their end unbinds us." I fell backward, heart convulsing with the meaning of it. The Emperor's mercy was not salvation, it was release. He was dissolving what humanity had built in his name, returning their faith to silence where it had begun. The chamber cracked around me, every surface hummed with dying resonance. The throne itself groaned, its sacred plates buckling under the pressure of something leaving not his body, but his presence. Outside, the sky split. The light that had been gold turned to a paler hue, silver white and soundless. It spread across terror like dawn and eclipse combined. Shadows lost their edges, even gravity seemed to forget its function. I stood because I could not kneel anymore. My armor hung in, pieces, fused to flesh. The marble beneath my boots rippled like water. The city below was weeping in fire. I could feel the voices of billions in my mind, the last prayers collapsing into raw sound. Some begged him to return, others begged him to finish what he had begun. I reached toward the sarcophagus. The glow inside was fading now, but not extinguished. It pulsed one final time, slow, weary. "You will remember," he said, "someone must." And then the throne went still. The silence that followed was unlike any before it. Not divine, not wholly human. The hum of the machinery died, leaving only the faint crackle of cooling metal. I felt emptiness spread through me where his presence had been. My heart tried to find its rhythm and failed. Around me, the last adepts bowed to nothing, murmuring prayers that no longer had a listener. The Emperor had spoken, and the Imperium had heard. Now there was only aftermath. The hum was gone. For the first time in 10,000 years, the golden throne was silent. I lay on the cold marble for a long while before I understood that the silence was real. No pulse, no machinery, no whisper of divine current through the conduits. Only the faint settling of cooling metal, and my own heartbeat slow, irregular, unsure it still belonged in the world. When I finally stood, the chamber had changed. The light had thinned to a pale shimmer, as if the air itself were remembering how to glow. The walls that once blazed with holiness were bare stone streaked with soot. The floor was a mirror of blackened gold, reflecting the shapes of the dead like constellations. I took a step. The sound of it echoed too loudly. Every motion felt like blasphemy against the quiet he had left behind. Brother Corin's armor lay where he had fallen, hollow as a shell. I touched the pauldron still warm. For a heartbeat I imagined I could feel his pulse. But it was only mine, confused and lonely, beating against the metal. The air smelled of incense and blood. Somewhere in the dark, oil dripped from a shattered conduit, marking the seconds with liquid patience. Each drop reminded me of the pulse I could no longer hear. I walked the perimeter of the sanctum, counting bodies, counting breaths. 50 custodians had stood watch at dawn. None answered now. Their visors reflected the dim light like a field of extinguished suns. At the base of the dais, the sarcophagus still shone faintly, a single seam of gold tracing its edge. I approached, slower than prayer. The surface was cracked but whole, like the skin of something resting rather than dead. I pressed my hand to it. Cold, no response. "Majesty," I whispered. My voice came out hoarse, mortal. "If this is your mercy, teach me how to bear it." Nothing answered. The silence was so complete that it seemed alive, listening, waiting, judging. I realized then that I had not felt alone in centuries. Even in his long dormancy, his presence had been constant, a background warmth beneath the skin. Now the emptiness had weight. I sank to my knees before the throne, not to pray but to remember. Images flickered in my mind. The wars, the parades, the endless chants that filled the palace halls. How many had lived and died believing that worship was enough? How many would survive without it? My armor chimed softly as I moved. The internal systems were failing one by one, icons blinking out like dying stars. The neural link to the throne was gone. For the first time since my creation, my mind was entirely my own, and it terrified me. Outside, the sky over Terra had turned grey. I could see it through the fractured dome, a thin, colorless light spreading across the horizon. Not gold, not divine, just morning. The sight of it broke something gentle inside me. I bowed my head and whispered the old oath, the one we spoke when taking our first watch. It felt smaller now, but honest. We guard the light of man, that it may outlive the stars. The words hung in the air, unanswered. Somewhere deep within the throne, metal shifted, once soft, like a sleeper turning. I froze. The sound faded as quickly as it came. Perhaps it was memory, perhaps not. I stayed kneeling, eyes closed, hands resting on cold marble. The silence pressed closer, heavy and holy, and I began to understand that this, too, was his will. I walked from the throne chamber when the cold reached my bones. Each step rang against the marble like a bell tolling for the dead. The great doors of the sanctum were open. They should have been sealed from the inside, locked by code and prayer, but they hung ajar as if nothing sacred remained to guard. The corridor beyond was lit only by the aftermath, a soft grey radiance, neither shadow nor light. It felt like the air after thunder, when the storm has gone but the world still trembles. Bodies lined the passage, not burned, not broken, simply still, their faces peaceful, lips parted as if caught, mid-breath. Priests, soldiers, adepts, every one of them bathed in that same pale glow. Their silence unnerved me more than any scream could have. It was not despair, it was calm. They looked content, as though they had been waiting for this all their lives and finally remembered why. I passed them slowly, whispering the names I could recall. Most did not answer. Some opened their eyes when I spoke, meeting my gaze without recognition. Their pupils shimmered gold. "Do you know me?" I asked one, a scribe in administratum robes, blood crusted on her lips. Her voice was soft, certain. "We all know you, custodian. You were his voice." The words pierced deeper than any blade. I wanted to deny it, but her expression left no room for argument. She reached up, fingertips trembling, and touched the aquila on my chest. "He said we are free," she whispered. "He said silence is the proof." I could not answer. She smiled faintly, exhaled once, and went still again, her breath fading into the quiet. I moved on. Outside the Hall of Requiems, I found what remained of the choir. Dozens of astropaths sat in a ring, eyes burned away, mouths open in silent song. A thin mist rose from them, psychic residue, the echo of the Emperor's last words. It hung in the air like incense, faintly luminous. Through the veil of it, I saw the palace beyond its spires dimmed, banners torn, statues cracked. Yet for all its ruin, there was no chaos, no battle, no running feet, no cries for help. Only the gentle shuffle of the living tending to the fallen, and the sound of distant bells tolling across the city. The people of Terra were not panicking. They were listening. Everywhere I looked, men and women stood still, faces turned upward, waiting for something beyond hearing. I realized then that the Emperor had not left them without faith. He had replaced it with silence. The whole world was holding its breath, reverent and afraid to break the stillness. I stepped into the courtyard. The wind carried ash and the scent of ozone. The sky was clear for the first time in memory. The storm above the throne dissipated into thin, pale light. A group of children stood among the ruins, hands clasped, eyes reflecting the dawn. One of them turned as I passed and spoke in a voice too calm for her years. "He said you remember," she told me. "When the silence hurts, you'll remind us why." Her words struck like benediction. I could not meet her gaze. I simply bowed my head. The wind shifted, carrying the faintest echo of the heartbeat I once guarded. It was distant now, somewhere beyond reach, or perhaps within every living thing. I felt it once more beneath my palm when I pressed my hand to my chest. Slow, steady, familiar. The Emperor's pulse was gone from the throne, but it remained in us. We had become its keepers. I looked up at the silent sky, where the light of dawn met the grey of the void. For the first time in my long service, I felt no command, no purpose, only peace. And I understood. Obedience was never the end. Memory was. The world had quieted to a whisper of ash. I walked once more through the corridors of the palace, though I no longer felt their weight. The walls, once alive with the thrum of reactors and the breath of prayer, now stood still, a cathedral emptied of its god. Yet the air was not empty. It waited. Outside, dawn had risen across the scorched horizon. The light was silver, clean, unpossessed. It washed through the shattered archways and across the marble floors, turning the dust to stars. Every step I took stirred them into motion, a slow drift of tiny galaxies around my feet. I passed the still forms of adepts and priests, their faces calm, eyes open to a sky they no longer feared. None had rotted. None had cooled. They seemed held in the instant before awakening guardians of a peace too vast for breath. My strength waned with every step. The armor hung loose upon me now, its servos, mute, its once holy runes reduced to faint etchings. But the silence around me lent strength, stranger than endurance. Each exhale felt like part of something larger, as though the palace itself was breathing through me. When I reached the sanctum again, the doors were gone, melted to slag. The throne waited in dim radiance, gold turned to amber, the color of memory. I climbed the steps without hesitation. The sarcophagus stood sealed smooth once more, unmarred by fracture or flame. Within it I could feel, not hear, not see, but feel the rhythm of something vast returning to rest. The pulse that had shaken the galaxy was now the faintest vibration beneath my palm. I bowed my head, touching my forehead to the metal. It was cold, but not lifeless. The sensation carried through my skin into the marrow, where his echo still lived. "You ended the song," I whispered, "but we will keep the rhythm." No answer came, yet the silence itself seemed to nod. The quiet had shape now, not absence, but rest. The throne exhaled once, a sigh deeper than machinery. I felt tears rise, unbidden. They fell upon the marble, small and bright. The floor beneath me shimmered. Each drop vanished into the veins of the stone, absorbed as offering. Outside, the bells of terror tolled not in alarm, but in slow procession. One by one, their notes spread across the city, carried by wind through broken spires. The sound reached the sanctum like distant thunder softened by time. I remembered then the child in the courtyard, the words she had spoken through lips too young for prophecy. "When the silence hurts, you'll remind us why." I understood. Memory was the only form of worship left. My breath grew shallow. My heart's beat in uneven rhythm, matching the slowing pulse within the throne. My vision narrowed to the gleam of gold before me, to the quiet that seemed to stretch forever. I lowered myself to the base of the dais, resting against the stone as a man might rest against the shoulder of a friend. The air was cool. The silence embraced me like armor never could. The world would rebuild without him, but it would remember. The pulse he left within us would guide the breathing of the ages. I closed my eyes. For the first time in centuries, I felt no duty, no command, only belonging. He sleeps again, and I am the breath that guards his dream.